Hey everyone, and welcome to VOX, a space that I hope will allow us to crunch some of the crunchiest data in American collegiate rowing in the pre-elite space in order to tell some of the stories of some of our top American collegiate rowing programs and the athletes that represent them. My name is Megan Kalmoe. I'm a former US national team rower turned freelance broadcaster, and I guess sports data nerd, at least as it pertains to the sport of rowing, because as I've started covering more and more rowing over the past couple of seasons, I think a lot about what it is that I want to share with an audience and the athletes, and what drives the different storylines that unfold in front of us as we tune in to all of our favorite events each spring. And oftentimes it's just simple data. It's out there. It just goes uncollected, unnoticed, and unpresented. And no one asked me to, but I am here to dig it up and share some of these numbers with you in order just to create some stories and some context for the sport and the universities and the athletes that we all love and support very much. So, as I'm getting into this and launching some of these ideas and sharing them with you, I thought, what better place to start than one of the biggest stages in the collegiate and pre elite space is the Under 23 World Championships. Let's go. Okay, so we've set the scene, and I think it's important just to jump right into what might be kind of the biggest stat of all of them when we're looking at under 23s this year, which is we have 53 countries that will be attending and competing for under 23 medals, 240 total entries, 18 events. Out of those 53 countries, 26 of those countries will have at least one member of their delegation that will be representing an NCAA or an IRA program. Now, even me, I'm not a numbers person, but you look at this just straight on face value, that's half of the countries that are coming. It's 49% officially, but half, more or less, of these countries will have at least one member of their team that will be coming back from an NCAA or IRA program. And that is huge because I think when we look at that, that means that we're not just looking at some of our bigger, wealthier, more established, and also English speaking countries, looking at you, GB, Australia. But we're seeing that that field is continuing to diversify and grow to include more countries and smaller countries. And in some of those cases, those delegations will have, yeah, just one or two, maybe athletes coming back from an American collegiate program. But at the same time, we're often seeing that in those instances, those small delegations are just small overall, with maybe just a few small boat entries or a total number of athletes in the single digits, which means that there's still a lot of room for those programs to continue to grow and expand and potentially seize more development opportunities by landing some of their athletes in these NCAA and IRA programs, as well as creating pathways for other small rowing nations to continue to work their athletes into the system as well. Okay, so we now know that half of our countries are bringing athletes from American universities, and we have our country count, but what about our university count? In 2025, we will have 35 different colleges and universities represented at the Under 23 World Championships, with a lot of our usual suspects leading the way with pretty big representation up at the top of the chart. But we should also note that we're featuring some programs not out of the CRCA Top 25 or IRCA Top 20, notably programs like Tulsa, SMU, UCLA, UCSD, USD, UMass, all those schools falling outside of those top national rankings, but still managing to get at least one athlete onto an international roster, which is fantastic. It looks great on Instagram to hype up your alums and your future recruits, and it demonstrates that your program is in a place that supports international level competition, even if you're not in contention for a top place in the national rankings right now. But of course, we also want to take a look at the top of the representation chart. That is what we came here to do. And we have some pretty familiar faces up here. Our two teams that took top honors and overall numbers for under 23 rosters this year are Princeton and Yale, both with 16 athletes each. And one thing that I think is actually pretty neat about this is that they're actually some of our more diverse delegations as well, with both of these programs repping three of the four different rowing classifications between open and lightweight men and women. So Princeton sending 5 open women, 10 open men, and the one and only lightweight woman in the under 23 field out of the IRA. And Yale sending 7 open women, 7 open men, and 2 lightweight men. So 16 athletes total, each for our top two Ivy League schools leading the way. But right behind them in third overall is the University of Washington with 15 total athletes. 6 open women, 9 open men for the Huskies. And then in fourth place, right behind them, it's the University of California with 13 total athletes, 4 open women, 9 open men. In the number 5 spot, this is an interesting one, and I want to make sure that we put an asterisk by this one because at number 5, we have the University of Texas with 11 athletes. But we have to note that all 11 of these athletes representing this program are open weight women. Texas just has the one varsity program in their department. There's no men, no lightweights to pad that roster. So this is actually a huge stat. And we should make sure that we note that our fifth biggest roster is actually coming from a pure women's program. Okay, let's round out the top 10. Stanford at number 6 with 9 athletes, followed by Syracuse at number 7 with 8. Then tied at the number 8 position is Harvard Radcliffe with 7 and Tennessee with 7. But another asterisk, Tennessee, again, another purely open weight women's roster. And then finally, tied in the number 10 spots, it's Brown and Dartmouth, each with 5 athletes, but with Dartmouth achieving that more diverse representation between open weight men and women, as well as some lightweight men. One last key takeaway from our list of schools is that we do have Division III representation this year at under 23s. Marietta College will be sending one athlete from their team. It's Nicholas Invernizzi out of their varsity 8 will be racing for Paraguay in the men's 4. So it's very important that we have our smaller institutions getting some names on rosters as well. And if you've listened to my commentary even once, you know that I have a real love for D3 rowing. So I'm really, really glad to be able to include them in this conversation. So moving on to dig even a little deeper into some of these big numbers, we can break them down a little bit further and we can take a look at which programs are sending the most men and the most women, which we've already touched on briefly, but I think it's worth highlighting nonetheless. For the women, it is, as I mentioned earlier, the University of Texas who will be sending the largest number of female athletes to under 23s this year with 11 women competing for 6 different countries. And, again, I just want to make sure that we take note of this because 11 women is significantly more than any other program has been able to field. I think the next closest number is 7. No one is close. So Texas really leading the way here for open weight women with their 11 athletes heading over there. So our Texas athletes that we will see on the international stage this summer for Australia, Chloe Cooper, Imogen Gray, and Lucy Searle, all having done turns in the 2V or the varsity 8 for Texas this year. They'll all be racing in the Australian women's 8. Rhiannon Luke and Abby Dawson, both for Great Britain, will be racing in the women's pair and the women's 8. Rhiannon out of the 2V and Abby out of the varsity 8 for Texas. Paula Beecher out of the varsity 4 for Texas will be racing in the German women's 8. Holly Davis, freshman, will be racing the Irish single, racing the 2v4 this year for Texas. Mark Vanderwall, big athlete out of the varsity 8 for Texas, will be racing in the women's pair for the Netherlands. Allie Alton, Phoebe Wise, and Taryn Kuyers, your 3 American athletes that will be racing in the women's 4 and the women's 8, having done turns in the 2v and the varsity 8 for Texas this year. And for the men, it's one of our top 2 teams overall, Princeton, who will be sending the largest group of men with 10 athletes from 4 different countries. For Australia, it's Daniel and Matthew Cashman out of the varsity 8 and the 2v8 for Princeton, as well as Ed Nutt, who rode in the varsity 8 this year. All 3 of those athletes racing in the Australian men's 8. Just one Canadian on board. Connor Bowman out of the 2v8 for Princeton will be racing in the men's pair for Canada. 4 British athletes, Marcus Shute, Theo Bell, Alex Perkins, and Tristan Wanger, all out of the varsity 8 and second varsity 8 for Princeton this season, will be racing in the men's pair, the men's 4, and the men's 8 for GB. Rounding it out, it's our 2 USA athletes, Andrew Wilkinson and Kian Aminiana, out of the 2v8 and the varsity 8 for Princeton. They'll both be racing in the USA men's 8. So that's it for our first dive into the numbers for this year's under 23s, but we'll see you next time when we break things down just a little bit further when we look at things by country and by boat class. See you then. Ciao.